The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting long shadows across the weathered walls of my old study. Outside, the night was still, the world hushed beneath a thick blanket of stars. I settled deeper into my worn leather chair, the scent of aged wood and old books surrounding me like ghosts of a lifetime. Tonight, I feel compelled to speak. To tell the story I've held within my heart for so many years, a story of friendship, betrayal, and a revenge that was as sweet as it was painful. I was a young man then, full of hopes and untainted by the harshness of the world. The town I grew up in was small, so small that everyone's name was known, and every door was a potential refuge or a source of secrets. It was the kind of place where promises meant something, and trust was a currency more valuable than gold. In those days, I had a friend. Not just a friend, a brother. We called each other that without hesitation, without fear of contradiction. His name was Samuel. He had a laugh that could fill a room, a smile that made you believe anything was possible. We were inseparable, two souls tethered by shared dreams and reckless optimism. When we were together, the world felt lighter, the future brighter. Samuel was the kind of man you'd trust with your life, or so I thought. We grew up side by side, playing under the same sun, learning the rhythm of the seasons together. We shared everything, our fears, our victories, our secret ambitions. We swore, once, beneath the old oak tree at the edge of town, that we would never let anything come between us. That promise was as pure as the morning dew. I remember how we used to sit by the riverbank, talking about the future, about leaving this small town behind, about building something lasting, something that mattered. We dreamed of opening a business, a place where people could come to find comfort and joy. We sketched plans on scraps of paper, our fingers stained with ink and dirt from those endless summer days. In that world of youth, Samuel was my compass, my shield. I never doubted him. Trust was effortless, and betrayal was a word I had never truly understood. But even the strongest bonds can unravel. I did not see the signs then. The little glances, the half-truths, the secrets hidden beneath smiles. I was too blinded by friendship, by loyalty, by hope. This chapter of my life was a time of light before the storm. And as I sit here, years later, I realize how fragile that light was, how easily it was extinguished. But for now, I hold on to those memories, the warmth of a brother's hand in mine, the sound of laughter echoing in the summer air. Because without understanding what was broken, how could I ever tell you about the revenge that followed? I remember the day the mirror shattered, not a mirror of glass, but the one that reflected my world, my heart, my belief in everything I had held dear. It was the kind of betrayal that burns deep, not with flames, but with a slow, suffocating chill that seeps into your bones. Samuel wasn't just my friend anymore that morning. He was the architect of my ruin. It began with whispers, rumors drifting through the streets like smoke, faint but poisonous. I dismissed them at first, convinced that nothing could be true. How could the man who shared every secret, every dream, betray me? It was unthinkable, impossible. But then, one afternoon, I found the evidence, cold and undeniable. Letters hidden away, deals made behind my back, lies tangled with my name. The betrayal was not born of a moment's weakness or a foolish mistake. No, it was deliberate, calculated, and cruel. He had stolen not just my trust, but my future. Samuel had taken the plans we had nurtured together and twisted them to his own gain. The business idea, the venture we had dreamed about. He used it to build his own empire, leaving me nothing but broken promises and shattered hope. Worse still, he spread false stories to the townsfolk, turning them against me with whispers of failure and dishonesty. The man I had called brother had become a stranger, a shadow looming over everything I had worked for. I stood at the crossroads of disbelief and heartbreak. The weight of his betrayal crushed me, sinking me into depths I never thought I could survive. I remember the hollow silence that followed, the numbness that wrapped itself around my soul like a heavy cloak. That night, I sat alone beneath the same old oak tree where we had sworn loyalty, my hands trembling, my mind racing with questions I had no answers for. How could he do this? Why? I wanted to scream, to lash out, to drown in my sorrow. But the pain was so profound, so raw, it left me silent. In those dark moments, I understood a cruel truth. Betrayal is not just about broken trust. It is about losing a piece of yourself. I was no longer the young man full of hope who had sat by the river dreaming of the future. I was a shattered reflection of what I once was, trying to piece together the fragments of a life ripped apart. But even in the deepest night, there is a flicker of light. I would not let this betrayal be my end. Somewhere beneath the ruins of my heart, a quiet fire was kindling. One that would grow into a force I could barely recognize at first. The path ahead would be long and treacherous, paved with pain and sacrifice. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I would have my revenge. Not for vengeance born of hatred, but for justice served with the sweetness of truth. The world did not stop turning the day I discovered Samuel's betrayal. The sun rose, the birds sang, and the small town went about its business as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything was different. The ground beneath my feet had shifted, and I was left to navigate a landscape littered with the debris of my shattered trust. In those weeks after the truth came crashing down, I became a ghost in my own life. I moved through the motions, working, eating, sleeping, but inside, I was hollow. The man I had been was gone, replaced by someone quieter, heavier, marked by the sting of loss. Friends I once considered family looked at me with pity or suspicion. Some whispered behind my back, their eyes filled with the same doubt Samuel had sown among them. Loneliness settled around me like a thick fog, isolating me even among familiar faces. I remember sitting in my small, empty room, the walls closing in as memories of Samuel, and our dreams played like cruel echoes. I questioned everything: my judgment, my worth, even the very nature of trust. If the one person I believed in most could betray me so thoroughly, who else could I trust? Yet in that silence, in that solitude, something unexpected began to take root. Pain, as sharp and unrelenting as it was, forced me to look inward. It forced me to confront my own vulnerability and find a strength I didn't know I had. It was a slow process. Days blurred into nights, tears mingled with quiet prayers. But with each passing moment, I gathered pieces of myself back together. I realized that despair could either consume me or forge me into something new. It was not an easy transformation. There were nights when the weight of sorrow threatened to drown me, when bitterness clawed at my heart. But somewhere beneath the grief, a small flame of resolve flickered, a determination to reclaim my life, my dignity, and my future. I began to plan quietly, carefully, not out of anger, but out of a need for justice. I would not be a victim forever. I studied Samuel from afar, watching how he carried himself with the arrogance of a man who thought he had won. But beneath that arrogance, I knew there were cracks I could exploit. Revenge, I decided, would not be a reckless blaze, but a slow, burning fire, sweet and precise. That was the beginning of my rebirth. The journey from broken to whole would not be swift, but it would be deliberate. And though my heart bore the scars of betrayal, I was learning that wounds can heal, and from their healing, strength can grow. The quiet aftermath was my crucible, the place where pain met patience and sorrow became resolve. And so I waited. The months after the betrayal taught me a lesson no school or book could offer: patience is the greatest weapon of all. In the silence of my solitude, I began to weave the threads of a plan. Not a plan born of reckless anger, but one rooted in clarity and calm. Revenge, I realized, is an art. It is not the burning of bridges in a wildfire of rage, but the careful placing of stones to build a path toward redemption. I watched Samuel closely. The man who had once been my brother had become a figure of hollow pride, surrounded by illusions of success and false friends. His smile was practiced, his charm like a mask. Beneath it, I saw the cracks forming, the pressure of deceit, the fragility of a house built on lies. I knew the truth would be my greatest weapon. I began gathering information, quietly, unobtrusively. I spoke to old acquaintances, listened to whispers, and watched how Samuel's empire teetered on the edge of ruin, propped up by greed and dishonesty. The business he'd stolen from me was a facade, riddled with debts and dangerous secrets. With each piece of knowledge, my resolve hardened. But I kept my composure, my actions deliberate and measured. There was no room for haste or fury. This was not about hurting him in return, but about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. My dignity, my future, my peace. I worked on rebuilding my own life too, small steps at first. Quiet jobs saving every penny, sharpening my mind and spirit. I learned patience was not just waiting, but preparing. There were nights I questioned myself. If this path of slow revenge was worth the cost, if the fire within me could ever be satisfied by justice rather than destruction. But I knew the answer. It had to be sweet, precise, and just. I remembered the oath we had made beneath that old oak tree, loyalty above all. Samuel had broken it, but I would honor it by not becoming the man who betrayed me. So, I planted the seeds of my revenge like a gardener tending his most delicate flowers. With care, with patience, and with quiet strength. This was my rebirth from betrayal, not as a broken man, but as one who would rise with grace and reclaim his place in the world. And when the time came to harvest, the sweetness would be undeniable. The day finally came when the seeds I had sown began to bear fruit. Quiet, inevitable, and undeniably sweet. I had watched Samuel for years, seen the facade crumble piece by piece, and now it was time for the final act. But I was no longer a man consumed by rage. Instead, I was steady, composed, and focused on justice. Samuel's empire, built on stolen dreams and fragile lies, was teetering on the edge. His false friends had started to drift away, sensing the rot beneath the surface. The debts he had hidden, the crooked deals he'd made in secret, all began to unravel, not by my direct hand, but through the careful exposure of truths I released to those who mattered. The townsfolk, the business partners, the people whose trust he had so easily betrayed. I could have struck harder, crushed him completely, but I chose a different path. Revenge, I had learned, was not about destruction. It was about reclaiming what was lost and restoring balance. One by one, the pillars of his false kingdom fell. His reputation was quietly dismantled through undeniable facts and patient revelations. The man who once smiled with arrogance now found himself isolated, his power slipping through his fingers like sand. And through it all, I stayed in the shadows. No grand confrontations, no bitterness aired in public. I let the truth speak for itself. But the sweetest moment came not from his fall, but from what I rebuilt for myself. With the business plans reclaimed and the community's support won back, I started anew. Not as a victim, but as a man reborn from the ashes. People came to me not with pity, but with respect. The same friends who had doubted me returned, this time with genuine faith. In that moment, I understood the true nature of revenge. It wasn't about making my betrayer suffer. It was about healing, about rising above pain, about reclaiming the dignity stolen from me. Samuel's betrayal had left a scar, yes. But it also forged in me a strength I never knew I possessed. And as I watched him fade into the background of our small town story, I felt no joy in his ruin, only a quiet peace. Justice was served, not with cruelty, but with the grace of truth. The fire in the hearth has dimmed now, and the night is deep, but my story is nearly done. As I sit here, old and worn, I find myself reflecting not just on the events that shaped my life, but on the lessons that betrayal, loss, and revenge have carved into my soul. Betrayal is a wound unlike any other. It cuts deep, not just because of the act itself, but because it is delivered by those we open our hearts to, those we call family. Samuel was more than a friend. He was my brother, and his treachery broke something inside me that has never fully healed. Yet, through that pain, I learned that betrayal is also a teacher. It showed me the fragility of trust, yes, but also the resilience of the human spirit. It forced me to look inside myself and find a strength I never knew I had. A strength not born of hatred, but of the desire to reclaim my dignity and peace. Revenge, I have come to understand, is a complicated thing. It is not a path of destruction or bitterness. True revenge is sweeter when it is quiet, when it is measured, and just. It is the reclaiming of what was stolen, the restoration of balance, and above all, the refusal to let pain define you. I did not seek to destroy Samuel. I sought to heal myself and to set the record straight. In doing so, I found that the greatest victory is not in seeing your betrayer fall, but in rising above the pain and finding peace. Forgiveness, that elusive, beautiful thing, remains difficult. I cannot say I have forgiven Samuel entirely. Perhaps that is a gift reserved for others. But I have forgiven myself for the naivety, for the trust given too freely, and for the time lost in sorrow. I tell this story not to glorify revenge or to revel in pain, but to remind anyone who listens that even in the darkest betrayals, there is a light waiting to be found. That light is your own strength, your own courage to face the broken pieces and build something new. So, if you ever find yourself betrayed, remember this: you are not alone. The road will be hard and the nights long, but from the ashes you can rise. Revenge will taste sweetest when it is served not with cruelty, but with grace. A grace that no betrayal can ever steal. And that, my friend, is the story I have lived. A story of betrayal, yes, but also of resilience, justice, and the quiet, sweet power of reclaiming one's soul.